Welcome to Better Than Gossip. I'm Kristen Coffield. I am your host today, and today's episode is going to be talking about a couple of my favorite subjects. We are going to be talking about wellness, and we are going to be talking about coffee. So when we talk about ageless advice for timeless women, this is going to be a great show. Our guest today is Andrea Schmidt. She is the co-founder of Misha's Coffee. She is also the co-founder of Trident Athletics. She has several women's world weightlifting titles, and she has a number of certifications in the field of health and wellness. Did you know about that?
What? I didn't hear. You know, that thing I've been telling you about. It's been a game changer for me.
Andrea, welcome to Better Than Gossip. We've done a couple of shows together where we've talked about coffee because you're an expert at coffee, but you're also an expert in the field of wellness. You and your husband own Trident Athletics. You are personally a women's world weightlifting expert, right? You've got, tell us what that is.
I won the world championship 4 times.
Yeah, it's no small deal. But wellness is a big part of everything you do. So can we talk a little bit about how coffee and wellness, like what that intersection is like, and how your experience as a as a gym owner, and somebody who's personally concerned about their own, health and wellness and functioning at their highest level, how coffee plays into that?
Yeah, I obviously love both coffee and wellness and fitness. And I think may not be the most popular thing to say, but I think like most things, the dose can either be the medicine or the poison. And it very much is about moderation and also finding individually what works for you. So for instance, for training, you can train too much. And there's some people, certain styles of exercise are, better than others for them. Coffee, it's similar. People metabolize caffeine differently, and that has a major effect on how healthy or not coffee is for you. If you're a fast metabolizer of coffee, coffee is one of the cleanest, safest, healthiest beverages in the world. If you are not a fast metabolizer of coffee in moderation and limited amounts will still be very healthy, but you have to be much more careful about how much you're consuming.
Yeah, and I have had thyroid issues, and so I can actually speak to the fact that when I was not medicating my underactive thyroid, I would have a cup of coffee and it was like I'd had 10. It was like I had the whole pot, and it made me feel awful. So I think it's important for people to understand, caffeine can be pretty powerful stuff. And, and knowing how much caffeine is in, what you're consuming can actually benefit your athletic performance. And we're actually going to take a look at Andrea at Trident CrossFit and see what the gym looks like. And then when we come back from that, I'd really like to hear a little bit more about how people can use coffee as part of their fitness program.
Absolutely. Here at Trident Athletics, this is the gym that I co-own with my husband, Chris. We opened in 2010. So it's been 12 years, which is hard to believe. What is the genesis of this? I had always been a coach. Growing up, I was a gymnast, and then I was injured. I ended up becoming a coach, a judge when I was in college. As I was first starting up at Misha's when I was 19, I was still coaching gymnastics, actually, for about 2 or 3 years. So I'd always had this like history of coaching. I stayed interested in fitness just personally, and then I got interested in CrossFit and ended up meeting who is now my husband, and he had started some military contracts, training some special operations guys, and asked me to start working on those with him. So we grew those from, it started as one class a day in one location and ended up being 3 classes a day in 3 locations, and I taught 2 a day for a few years. So I would go in the morning, train these guys, come and roast coffee, go back at lunch, train some guys, come back and work. And then we decided that we wanted our own facility. So I was doing that coaching in like 2007, 2008. By 2010, we opened this facility, and it's been really fun. It's been really a great compliment to Misha's because both are definitely successful, I think, because of the community feel that they bring, and then also the quality of both places. So Misha's is about our coffee, and that's been something that I've been obsessed with for 3 decades, and the quality of the coffee, the experience, the way the place feels. People want to go there because they feel good. They feel like they belong there. Trident's the same way. It's about fitness, but it's really about having a place that you go that you feel good, that you want to consistently go to. Because honestly, I think lots of things can keep you fit. You really just have to find something you like. But if it's not something you like, you're not going to be consistent. And consistency, especially as we age, is by far the most important thing. Extremes are really exciting. The extremes seem like you can get fast results with an extreme, whether it's diet or fitness, but you can't live in an extreme. It's not sustainable. So that's when you see people go they go and then back to the other end. So for me, Trident is a place that we have members that have been coming for over a decade. Kristen's husband was our first member.
First member was
Bill
my
Coffield.
husband.
Yep.
Tell us about the CrossFit Games. You were instrumental with that.
Yeah, the CrossFit Games started in 2007. I was actually at the 2008 Games vending coffee. I flew out to California, and it was really hard to actually figure out. I was like, wait, how do I make coffee? I don't have any equipment. I found some people out there to lease me some equipment. So I got involved there, just kind of supporting it, and then became involved in running the events. So my husband and I ran these regional events. So I didn't know I was going to become a sports event planner, but that was also like an additional career over the years. I also, I worked for CrossFit for 11 years teaching seminars. So anyone that wants to be a CrossFit trainer has to go through a CrossFit Level 1 course. They also have a Level 2 course. They have a certification that's a test of 3. So I still am one of probably only a few hundred CrossFit Level 4 coaches in the world, and I trained trainers for 11 years, which was really fun. Got to travel around. It's also just kept me really on top of things, because if I was teaching people, I knew I had to really keep getting better as a coach. So yeah, that's been really fun.
It was fun to see you at the gym, and the gym is beautiful. My husband was the first member of the gym when you guys first opened, and you've built quite a community there. When I wake up in the morning, I like to work out at 5 a.m., and I do a little bit of cold brew coffee before I go to the gym. What's that doing for me?
Well, caffeine has some great benefits performance-wise. So pre-exercise, it's going to give you more focus. It's actually increases your strength, endurance, coordination, which a lot of people aren't aware of. And obviously it's going to wake you up. So for those 5 a.m. workouts, it's kind of a must for some people. So those are definite like nootropic performance benefits of caffeine. Caffeine does have a longer half-life than most people realize. It's like 5 to 6 hours. What that means is simply that half that much caffeine is still going to be in your body 5 or 6 hours later. So that really changes things if you know that caffeine affects your sleep. So for me personally, I think I'm actually a fast metabolizer, but I am a sensitive sleeper, so I don't drink coffee past usually 11.
Yeah, me too. And actually, I like to say the earlier I drink my coffee, the more I enjoy it. So that little bit of coffee before my workout really does taste great. And I feel like I definitely get through that 5 a.m. workout with a little more oomph going. But nootropic, can you explain? A lot of people might not have heard the term nootropic. It's one of my favorite terms. I'm a big fan of David Perlmutter, and he is a neurologist who is talking about longevity and brain health. So what are nootropics, and how do they benefit us?
Nootropics are basically just compounds that are beneficial for the brain. And caffeine is certainly one of them. Caffeine is a stimulant. Caffeine, why it can affect your health, your sleep, is it works on your adenosine receptors. So adenosine is what makes us feel sleepy. Okay. So when you have caffeine, you don't feel sleepy. And that also gives you that extra bit of focus. So, before a meeting, before you have to do anything that requires like that brain power, caffeine is like one of the greatest nootropics you can have.
And there's different types of caffeine because the caffeine in green tea is a little bit different than the caffeine in coffee. So, we get caffeine in different things. You get caffeine in chocolate even, which it might be why some people feel really good when they eat chocolate. What are some of the other health benefits of coffee?
Well, just real quick on the caffeine, this will be just an estimate for people to have, because like brewing methods can change it a little bit how strong, but typically an 8-ounce cup of coffee is going to have, and this is I think 12 actually. Okay. We used to have 8-ounce cups, but the industry, everything's just gotten bigger. 8-ounce cup of coffee is about 100 milligrams of caffeine. Black tea would be approximately half that. Green tea would be approximately 25 to 30% of that. Does that make sense? Yeah. So those things are lower in caffeine, green tea being the lowest of them all. The FDA, I believe, recommends no more than 400 milligrams of caffeine a day. FDA, that's an estimate. If you're a fast metabolizer, and that's another point actually, you can easily take a test. 23andMe actually has a test to tell you whether you're a fast or slow metabolizer. So if you've done 23andMe, you can go to your report, you can find out. Very good to know, because if you find that out, you can exceed 400 milligrams a day and you'll probably be just fine. If you are a slow metabolizer, caffeine needs to be broken down in the liver, like 95% of it. And some people just don't have the ability to break it down quickly or efficiently. They are going to really want to limit their coffee probably to like no more than 100 milligrams a day. But keep in mind, if you're drinking a bunch of other stuff that has caffeine, it's very easy to get way beyond the 400 milligrams, because most people aren't only drinking coffee as a caffeinated beverage.
I have another question that I think is really important. And anybody who knows me from the Culinary Cure knows that I am always talking about hydration. Hydration. We start with hydration. It's the foundation we build all our wellness on. Where does coffee fall in the hydration equation?
Well, coffee, as you may know, is a bit of a diuretic, because caffeine is actually what is a diuretic. So it can dehydrate you. So if you drink a lot of coffee, you should certainly make sure that you are hydrating with water in addition to your coffee.
Right. So I always like to say to people, if you're going to have a cup of coffee, add an extra glass of water for every caffeinated beverage that you enjoy. So that gives people the tools to kind of manage their own caffeine intake, and also the water and the hydrating's going to help you process that caffeine a little bit better too. So Andrea, you are a busy lady. You've got 2 full-time jobs. You own a coffee business and you own a fitness business, and you coach people. So when you're coaching people, tell us a little bit more about how you help them manage their overall, I think it's important to add this here in this show, their overall wellness and diet. Like, where does coffee fall in that? I always tell people you want a breakfast with fiber, fat, and protein. Should they have their coffee before or after breakfast? Does it matter?
It kind of depends for performance. What coffee, if you are trying to lose weight, caffeine and coffee you will lose your appetite a little bit. You are not as hungry. So that can be a little bit of a trick that some people will do is they'll wake up and they'll have coffee. They won't be hungry. If they're into intermittent fasting, it makes it much easier to push their first meal to break the fast a few hours later. Now, that being said, that's black coffee. If you put a bunch of stuff in your coffee, that's not going to be so healthy. So for me, I'm a believer in what is consistent is what is going to get you results. So these really extreme things, they'll get you someplace quickly, but very hard to stay there. And you'll usually bounce back and be back to before where you were before you started. So I believe in small, sustainable changes. Not as sexy, the results might not be as fast, but it works. So for instance, coffee, if you know you're drinking too much, you don't need to quit, maybe cut back. Or cut back if you're drinking it in the afternoon, cut back in the morning. I agree with a meal. I'm big on protein. Have protein and fat in every meal and some carbohydrate, depending on
fiber
where you are, and fiber.
Yeah, get that fiber.
Real food. I'm a big proponent of as much real food as possible. For coffee, little bit of cream or something, fine. Where a lot of people go wrong with coffee is they are having an entire meal that doesn't have much in the way of nutrients other than the coffee, honestly.
Right.
The coffee's got antioxidants,
The calories,
polyphenols.
you mean,
But the calories, fat, sugar, very easy to consume 400 or 500 calories in, not much bigger than this.
Right.
Much less if you had these like 20 and 24 ounce beverages. They might have easily 50 to 75 grams of sugar. And then not only that, the combination of the caffeine and sugar is going to cause a big up and a big crash. And when you have the big crash, some people feel, I need more sugar, more coffee.
Right.
And it's a kind of...
Or more carbohydrates.
Yep.
And that can lead to cravings. And I think it's important to recognize that the coffee industry has changed so much. And there are a lot of coffee-like beverages out there where when we're talking about coffee, we're talking about a cup of brewed coffee or a cup of coffee, an espresso or a pour over. And we're going to go into some more detail about the different types of coffee and how we can make those coffees. But first, we're going to take a little bit of a coffee break.
Hi, my name's Heather. I'm a mother of 2, and I'm also a morning TV reporter. So I get up at 3:30 in the morning, and I love coffee. I started putting Bub's MCT powder in my coffee as a dairy alternative, and I love the flavor, and I love how it makes me feel. Basically, it helps me maintain energy levels throughout the entire morning, and then moving into my day when I go home to my kiddos, it's still helping. It helps with my cognitive alertness so that I can talk well on TV after I've woken up so early in the morning, and it makes me feel good so I don't have the caffeine jitters.
Welcome back, and we are talking about coffee and wellness and the benefits of caffeine as a nootropic to stimulate the brain in ways that are good for us. But coffee can also, people talk about getting kind of like jagged, from drinking coffee. And I know that very often when I'm working with people in a wellness capacity, we need to evaluate the role that coffee plays, because sometimes coffee is actually overstimulating their adrenals.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's very common. I've seen it a lot in type A people. Not naming any names, maybe myself a little. There's a tendency to get in a cycle of just, because you're capable of doing more, you just keep pushing. Your sleep isn't good. You wake up, you're exhausted. You have more coffee. You start to crash in the afternoon. You have more coffee. Your cortisol's high at the wrong times, low at the wrong times. And all of these things, it's kind of a perfect storm to it's just too taxing to the adrenals. Right. And sometimes you might need to take a break from caffeine or reduce it heavily. My recommendation is not to just go cold turkey if you're drinking a ton of coffee, right? Because caffeine does have a withdrawal. If you have been drinking a ton of caffeine and you go to none, I think anybody that's experienced the caffeine headache, whew, it is not fun. So my recommendation would be to roll back your coffee consumption. If you want to quit coffee, switch to tea, which will immediately cut your caffeine consumption in half or by 75% if you switch to green tea. But you'll get just a little bit of caffeine in the morning to help you not have that withdrawal.
Yeah. When we do the 21-day detox and reset and people give up alcohol and caffeine, hands down, the caffeine is the hardest thing for them to give up. That is really tough for people. And so for me personally, I can have one full cup of coffee a day. I have that little bit before I do my workout. And that's just like a really short little bit of cold brew in a cup. But I really do need to be careful about the caffeine, and maybe sometimes it's the acidity of the coffee too. How do I navigate that? Like, what would I look for in a bean if I want the ritual of coffee, but I want lower caffeine?
Well, for one, obviously, as I stated in the earlier show, Arabica has half the caffeine of Robusta, so avoid anything with Robusta because it's going to have a lot more caffeine.
So skip the diner coffee.
Skip the diner coffee, or skip any blends that are that you don't know if they're 100% Arabica. That would be the first thing. Brewing method makes a big difference. Caffeine's water soluble. The longer that the coffee is saturated in the water, up to a certain point, like it can not be any more saturated, but the longer processes, like processes where it sits, you're typically going to have more caffeine.
Okay.
Hot water extracts more caffeine. So cold brew, theoretically, you would think would have less caffeine, but the concentration is very high in cold brew. So the amount of coffee versus the water can affect it. For coffee drinks, I stated earlier, like a cup of coffee is about 100 grams, and a single espresso is 40 grams. So a double espresso and a cup of coffee are about the same amount of caffeine, which is helpful to know. So you could go to a single espresso or a single espresso latte if you wanted to reduce caffeine that way. Cold brew is also very easy to drink. So cold brew and nitro cold brew, you can just before you know it, you're like,
I have so had that experience, and that coffee I drink in the morning is a cold brew, and I get it in a can, and I pour it actually into a glass jar that I keep in my fridge, and one can of cold brew gets me through like 4 mornings. So I have been somewhere where there was a keg of nitro cold brew, and they had the cups out. It was at a wedding, and we would go in the morning, and I would just have a cup, and it was so delicious. And then I'd have a second cup, and I was literally like, oh my goodness, like it's a horrible feeling. Is there anything you can do if you over caffeinate? Like where do you go from there?
I mean, I think it's really just time, because it's got a half-life. You have to metabolize it.
Right.
So
you better eat that fiber fat. Eat some fat and some protein. Drink some water.
But it does kind of kill your appetite.
Yeah, so it does kind of kill your appetite.
Yeah.
So that can be tough. The half-life of caffeine is something people need to be aware of. And we were debated whether we were going to touch on this, but I think parents need to be aware that a lot of these coffee drinks that look like milkshakes and stuff, that it does have caffeine in it, and kids can be very sensitive to caffeine. So
absolutely,
we want to be aware of that. What else? What other things about caffeine would be interesting to our listeners today?
I mean, I think a lot of people know that pregnant women, their metabolization of caffeine changes while they're pregnant. So a lot of women just forego caffeine completely, but you definitely should limit it to about 200 milligrams a day if you are consuming caffeine while pregnant. It's just something to keep in mind.
So that's a really interesting thing.
So you could be a fast metabolizer. Typically, you get pregnant and it's not going to be the same. Your body changes. And I think that is actually one of the most interesting things to think about, is nothing in our body exists in a vacuum. It's not like caffeine just works on one part of our body, on our brain. It's like everything has an effect. The endocrine system, everything is connected. So anything that affects one hormone is going to affect other hormones. I mentioned early that caffeine affects adenosine. That doesn't mean that's the only hormone that's affected.
Right.
The hormones work like in a symphony together. So you can't just pluck one out and say, oh, it's just doing this. So I think just being aware and being in tune with your own body and honest about how you're feeling and something's affecting you.
And caffeine can be that thing where, just like me with that nitro cold brew, give it a little time before you have that second cup, to see how you're processing it. And I know that the generation, my parents and Bill's parents, they can drink coffee after dinner and it doesn't seem to affect them. They go right to sleep.
Yeah.
But each person is so individualized that, we really need to kind of summarize that. Some of the most important things to remember are we should always be buying 100% shade-grown, if possible, Arabica beans. And when we can buy from small independent roasters who are buying from,
The coffee's sourced very well that way.
Yeah, we're supporting these communities and aligning our consumer dollars with our values. So a great cup of coffee might cost a little bit more, but it's worth it.
And you really... Even as a seller of coffee, I will say most people should not be drinking coffee all day long.
Right.
So better to spend a little more money on a really quality coffee, truly savor it, enjoy it, and if you're not drinking it all day, it won't break the bank
Switch
either.
to green tea or water. I love to save that hydration bit.
Yeah.
Drink more water.
Absolutely.
So one of the favorite parts of the show is always our secret sauce. And Andrea's got a really excellent secret sauce for us today.
So many people don't know, but there are compounds called diterpenes in coffee. Diterpenes can actually raise LDL cholesterol. So my secret sauce tip is, if you have any cholesterol issues, make sure that you are not preparing your coffee in a French press. And probably avoid espresso as well, because the great news is it is very easy to remove diterpenes with a paper filter. So if you go and get your blood work done, your LDL is high, pay attention to how you're brewing your coffee.
That's such a great tip. And high cholesterol's a really big problem for a lot of people. A lot of that's our diet, a lot of that's our environment. So just knowing that you could drink your coffee through a paper filter, and that could change the whole chemistry of that.
And an AeroPress would work as well too, because
Okay.
that has a kind of fabric filter that will filter out the diterpenes.
Excellent. I gave some AeroPresses as Christmas gifts this year for
I love them.
for my traveling coffee drinkers. So we talked about the half-life of caffeine. We talked about some of the things that people don't know, like there are two types of coffee. There's Robusto, which has higher caffeine, is a lower quality coffee. Arabica is the best coffee we can drink, and we should seek that out. And now our secret sauce, that if you have high cholesterol, you want to make sure you're drinking coffee that's been through an AeroPress or a paper filter. So that's excellent. Well, this has been so much fun to have you on the show, sharing your wealth of knowledge about coffee and about wellness. And Andrea Smith, can you tell us, where can people get more information both about Misha's coffee and about Trident CrossFit?
Oh yes, you could go to mishascoffee.com. For Better Than Gossip viewers, we are offering a free half pound with any order. And you can see what we're up to at tridentathleticsva.com, or you can check us out on Instagram for both of them.
Yeah, Misha's for Coffee on Instagram. It's a wonderful account, and very often my posts end up there.
Yes,
so
I
that's
love
really
that.
fun. So thank you for joining us today at Better Than Gossip, Ageless Advice for Timeless Women. I'm Kristen Coffield. We had Andrea Smith with us today, and we look forward to seeing you on future shows.